He was buried as a saint. People came from miles to pray at his tomb, convinced of miracles that followed his name. Decades passed, centuries even, and his legend only grew. Then historians decided to open his resting place. The doors creaked, dust choked the air. Bones lay as they had been for hundreds of years, relics untouched. But something was missing. His eyes, cleanly removed from their sockets. No marks of decay, no tool left behind. Just empty hollows staring back at whoever dared look. How could this happen long after his death? Who or what had claimed them? And why? Whispers in the archives hinted at secrets no one dared write down. Secrets that could undo the very faith built around his life. The tomb held its silence. But for those who peered inside, the questions clawed like unseen hands. What was left behind was not just a body. It was a warning, and it was still watching. The saint had lived a life that blurred the line between devotion and obsession. His hands had healed the sick. His words had calmed the violent. Pilgrims flocked to him, and rulers whispered about the power he held. When he died, the people declared him holy, certain that his body would be a vessel of miracles even in death. A grand tomb was constructed, adorned with carvings depicting scenes of his life, angels bearing witness, and inscriptions promising protection and blessing. For centuries, the tomb remained undisturbed. Pilgrims knelt, left offerings, and prayed. Scholars recorded the details, priests kept the keys, and the legend thrived. Then came the day the tomb was open for study, a scientific curiosity meant to confirm sainthood. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Bones aligned as if in repose, clothing and relics preserved in the careful custody of time. Even his skull was intact. But then the scholars noticed something impossible. His eyes were gone, cleanly removed, as though by a precise hand, centuries after his burial. There were no signs of decay, no marks of burial disturbance, no scratches of rodents or tools. It defied logic, medicine, and history. The silence in the chamber became suffocating. Whispers began. Could the removal have been a ritual, a punishment, a theft for some unknown purpose? They examined texts, religious accounts, diaries of the caretakers, and nothing explained it. Some suggested a secret cult had acted long after his death, one that believed the saint's eyes held prophetic power. Others whispered darker theories, that the saint himself had been marked by enemies of faith, cursed in a way that transcended death. But evidence was scarce. The tomb's records were meticulous. No unauthorized entries, no signs of forced access, only the saint's body, preserved in perfection, minus the eyes. It was as if the very act had been invisible. Historians debated, the human eye is fragile. How could anyone remove it centuries later without disturbing the rest of the skull? And why? As the months passed, more discoveries came to light. Nearby tombs showed traces of minor disturbances, but never anything so precise. Patterns emerged in obscure chronicles. Other saints, other holy figures, bodies found desecrated long after death. Each case eerily similar. Eyes missing, marks untraceable, motives unrecorded. It seemed like a dark ritual spanning generations, invisible to time itself, leaving only questions. Even modern science could not fully explain it. Radiocarbon dating confirmed the removal happened centuries post-mortem. Chemical analysis found no contemporary tools, no modern intervention. Whatever had been done, it was done with knowledge lost to history. Those who studied the remains felt watched, as though the saint, or something bound to him, had left an imprint on the world. The locals, descendants of the original worshippers, began to speak of dreams. Dreams of a face without eyes staring through the centuries, pleading, demanding, warning. Pilgrims who once visited in hope now whispered of unease. Faith had not vanished, but fear had crept into devotion. The saint's legend had become something else entirely, a puzzle encoded in silence, a warning buried beneath layers of time. Who could claim the eyes of a saint long after death? Was it devotion gone awry, a ritual lost in secrecy, or something beyond human comprehension? The answers, if they exist, lie in shadows, in the spaces between legend and history, in the hollow sockets that once witnessed the world, and the world centuries later still wondered. The discovery of the missing eyes ignited a storm among historians, clergy, and the curious. Word spread quickly. An ancient saint, buried and venerated for centuries, violated in the most precise, unnatural way. Experts convened. They documented every detail. Each bone, each relic, every inch of the tomb was scanned, mapped, and analyzed. The skull, now the center of an international debate, became more than a relic. It became a riddle. Archaeologists noted the meticulousness. The eyes had been removed without disturbing the surrounding bone. The sockets were unnervingly smooth, almost surgical, Microscopic analysis revealed faint traces of an organic preservative, but of a kind unknown to modern chemistry. The tomb had not been breached in conventional terms. There were no signs of modern tools, no scratches, no handling marks. Whoever or whatever had taken them operated with knowledge of anatomy that should have been impossible in that era. Theories abounded. Some claimed the saint's eyes were considered a vessel of divine vision, capable of witnessing truth beyond mortal perception. Others whispered about forbidden knowledge, that the eyes were sought by secret societies who believed they contained prophetic insight, encoded in a way that transcended time. A few historians even suggested darker forces, rituals designed to bind or release power from the saint's spirit. Personal accounts added layers of horror. A caretaker's diary from the 16th century described an angel with hollow eyes appearing in the church at night, a vision that left him trembling for weeks. Another text recounted pilgrims fainting near the tomb, claiming the saint's gaze followed them despite being centuries dead. The most disturbing entry was unsigned, scratched hastily in a forgotten ledger. They come for the eyes when the world forgets to watch. Modern science attempted to rationalize the impossible. Radiography, carbon dating, chemical analysis, all confirmed what the historians already feared. The act was ancient, deliberate, and precise. No decay explained it. No human intervention in the records explained it. The only conclusion, uncomfortable as it was, suggested knowledge and intent that exceeded ordinary human capacity. Scholars began to compare other saints and holy figures. Patterns emerged. Accounts of missing eyes, dismembered relics, and posthumous desecrations were scattered across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Each time, centuries separated the saint's death and the removal. Each time, the act was surgical, deliberate, and inexplicable. Some began to theorize a network, a chain of knowledge passed through secret custodians, invisible to history, whose purpose was never recorded. But then the human element entered. Families of the original worshippers reported nightmares. Children awoke screaming, claiming to see the saint's empty gaze following them. Pilgrims refused to approach the tomb, citing sudden chills and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. One historian who spent nights studying the skull confessed to waking with scratches on his arms, as if the saint's eyes had reached beyond death. The tomb had become a locus of fear, a convergence of legend, history, and inexplicable terror. Even the clergy were divided. Some insisted the eyes were stolen to prevent the saint's spirit from becoming too powerful. Others feared the removal was a curse, a deliberate act to punish generations for unspoken sins. Prayers, blessings, and rituals were performed, yet no one could restore what was taken. Questions spiraled. Who had done this and why? Why now, centuries after death? Why leave everything else intact? And most unsettling of all, what had been glimpsed through those eyes that required them to be taken, hidden, or perhaps protected? The saint's legacy had shifted from sanctity to enigma. He was no longer a figure of devotion only. He had become a riddle, a warning, and a symbol of knowledge humanity was never meant to hold. In the archives behind locked doors and fragile manuscripts, one phrase recurred, almost as if it were a cipher. The eyes see beyond time. The eyes are never forgotten. Scholars argued endlessly over its meaning, but the words were chilling. The saint had been venerated, prayed to, celebrated, and yet even centuries later, he could not rest. Someone or something had claimed what was never theirs, leaving emptiness where divine sight once lived. The question lingered, would history repeat itself, or had the act of removing the eyes set a chain in motion that the world could never undo? The more historians studied the saint's tomb, the more they realized that the removal of his eyes was only the surface of a much larger enigma. Every detail about his life, death, and posthumous reverence became suspect. Records suggested he had not been a simple holy man, but someone whose insight into people, events, even politics, was extraordinary. Letters written during his lifetime hinted at secrets that could destabilize kingdoms, reveal corruption, or inspire movements of rebellion. If his eyes were the windows of his wisdom, removing them might have been a way to silence knowledge that transcended his death. A team of forensic archaeologists began to study the tomb using the most advanced technology available. 3D scans revealed microscopic tool marks on the orbital sockets, the type no ordinary blade could produce centuries ago. Chemical residue suggested a compound unknown to modern science had been applied to prevent decay. Organic traces, undetectable at first, hinted at substances that preserved the tissue of the eye itself long after death. These discoveries were classified in scientific journals, some withheld for decades for fear of public panic. Meanwhile, the narrative of miracles surrounding him took a sinister turn. Some miracles were documented as accurate visions, fires prevented, assassinations averted, and political upheavals quietly thwarted, all attributed to his intervention. But others were darker, almost impossible to explain. Those who claimed to see him in visions described a figure with hollow black sockets, watching them silently, predicting misfortunes, or whispering warnings they could not fully understand. Priests who had written in his favor began to cross themselves when recounting those visions, suggesting the saint's power, even in death, had become something feared rather than revered. Further studies unearthed a curious pattern. Across Europe, tombs of saints and holy men occasionally displayed the same phenomenon: missing eyes. Scholars initially dismissed these accounts as legends, exaggerations, or the results of grave robbers. But carbon dating, forensic examinations, and archival research proved otherwise. The removals were consistent, occurring centuries after burial, and all executed with unmatched precision. Whoever had orchestrated these acts had a method, an agenda, that persisted through generations. Secret societies began to enter the story. Historical documents suggested that clandestine groups devoted themselves to collecting relics from saints, believing that these bodies held keys to knowledge beyond human comprehension. Some documents described rituals where eyes were extracted to contain the vision, or release the insight to the worthy, or punish the unworthy. Whether these societies still existed was unknown, but the possibility alone sent shivers through historians and clergy alike. The saint's case stood out because of the meticulous preservation of the rest of his body. No bones were broken, relics remained untouched, clothing and offerings were intact. The act of removing his eyes, centuries later, appeared deliberate, almost ritualistic rather than opportunistic. The precision suggested a level of expertise lost to time, a knowledge possibly encoded in secret manuscripts, whispered only among initiates. Then came the more disturbing human accounts. Pilgrims and caretakers reported inexplicable phenomena near the tomb. Some described hearing footsteps when no one was present, shadows moving against the flow of light, and whispers in unknown tongues. One archaeologist recounted waking to find the saint's skull repositioned slightly, as if turned to face him, although no human could have entered the locked chamber. Skeptics dismissed it, but patterns of such accounts spanned centuries, appearing in diaries, letters, and confessions. The saint's presence, or whatever remained of him, was not dormant. The more the researchers delved, the more they questioned the nature of death itself. How could an act occur centuries after life ended? Could knowledge or even consciousness survive long after the body decayed? Some proposed the possibility of an ancient, hidden technology, now lost, capable of operating across generations. Others whispered of forces beyond comprehension, an intelligence, something neither fully human nor fully divine, interacting with the world in ways beyond observation. Even political powers began to take notice. Nobles and clerics, upon learning of the missing eyes, debated removing other relics for protection. Some argued it was blasphemy. Others feared the consequences if the saint's power, however latent, was ever fully realized. The tension between devotion and fear mirrored that of the saint's own life, revered yet feared, admired yet suppressed. The investigation reached a chilling turning point when researchers noted an anomaly in the local population's records. Descendants of the saint's earliest followers reported vivid dreams of hollow eyes, visions that often correlated with major historical events. Economic crises, wars, and inexplicable disasters seemed to align with these collective subconscious warnings. The idea emerged that the saint's eyes had not only been removed, they had been taken to observe, to watch, and perhaps to influence history in ways still beyond comprehension. Ultimately, the saint's legacy became a paradox. He was worshipped as a holy man whose eyes had been stolen, yet the theft itself elevated him into something far darker, a figure whose absence of sight had amplified his omnipresence. He was no longer merely a saint to be revered, he had become a cipher, a riddle spanning centuries. His hollow gaze a symbol of knowledge claimed, power restrained, and the mysteries of life and death intertwined. Historians, clergy, and curious onlookers were left with an unsettling realization. The world may have long ceased to understand the rules of life, death, and the remnants left behind. Some knowledge was perhaps meant to be hidden, yet its extraction left footprints impossible to ignore. The saint, silent for centuries, had left a void, but it was a void that was not empty. It was watching, waiting, and questioning those who dared to look into the darkness that remained where eyes should have been. Modern investigators approached the tomb with tools far beyond what past centuries could imagine. High-resolution imaging, chemical spectroscopy, and forensic reconstruction promised clarity. But the more they examined, the deeper the darkness seemed. Every scan of the skull revealed an unsettling precision. The orbital cavities were flawless, untouched by decay, as if the eyes had been removed by a hand that understood not only anatomy, but something far older. A ritualistic perfection honed over centuries. Teams cross-referenced ancient texts looking for any mention of eye removal among saints. Fragments from monastic scrolls described visions stolen from the living and the dead, while marginalia in the margins of forgotten tomes hinted at ceremonies where the eyes were believed to hold the essence of perception, perhaps even prophecy. One scholar noted an alignment between these texts and the saint's life, pointing to the possibility that his eyes were targeted long before his death, prepared for removal at a precise moment when history would demand it. The phenomenon wasn't isolated. Other tombs across Europe, long thought disturbed by grave robbers, showed the same meticulous patterns. Eyes removed with surgical care, traces of unknown compounds, a deliberate absence that spoke not of theft, but of extraction with purpose. Patterns suggested an organized network, moving silently through time, beyond detection, carrying out acts that blurred the line between science and ritual, devotion and fear. Witnesses who approached the saint's tomb reported unease that defied logic. Some spoke of fleeting shadows behind glass, glimpses of movement where none could exist. Others described the sensation of eyes upon them, not present, yet unmistakable. One young historian admitted to waking in the night, paralyzed with the sense that someone or something had been watching him, silent and unseen. The phenomenon suggested the saint's absence of sight had not ended his capacity to observe. In a way, the missing eyes had amplified his presence. The local community, once reverent, now feared the tomb. Pilgrims who had once knelt in prayer hesitated, reporting nightmares, chills, and feelings of unseen attention. Attempts to secure the tomb with modern locks and alarms failed to prevent the unsettling occurrences. Researchers speculated that the extraction of the eyes may have initiated a chain of events, the creation of a feedback loop between the saint's consciousness and the living world, a connection neither fully understood nor controllable. Scientific analysis revealed traces of compounds that did not belong to any known organic or synthetic chemistry. Microscopic fibers suggested the use of instruments centuries ahead of their time, yet no historical record accounted for such tools. Some theorized that the act itself was never meant for human comprehension. It was deliberate, precise, and beyond the capability of mortal hands. Or perhaps the eyes had never been intended to be seen by humans again. The implications gnawed at everyone involved. If the removal of the eyes was purposeful, what did it signify? Control? Protection? Punishment? Perhaps those who acted had intended to prevent the saint from witnessing events beyond death. Events that, in their absence, had the power to ripple through generations. The mystery became layered. The saint's eyes were missing, yet the world around him seemed inexplicably influenced, as if knowledge of the unseen had seeped into reality. Even modern technology could not dispel the sense of dread. Cameras malfunctioned. Sensors recorded anomalies that defied explanation. Human intuition, often dismissed in scientific circles, became a crucial indicator. Every person who spent time near the tomb reported a growing sensation that the saint was aware, watching, assessing. The question remained, what had been observed through those eyes, and what knowledge had been deliberately taken from history? What had started as an archaeological curiosity became a psychological and historical enigma. The saint, once merely a figure of veneration, had become a silent observer of centuries, his absence of sight transforming him into a presence that could not be ignored. And the most unsettling thought of all lingered in the minds of those who studied him. If the eyes had been taken centuries after death, could the process ever happen again? Could others, hidden across time and space, be preparing to extract what humanity was never meant to know? The closer researchers got to understanding the saint, the more unsettling their discoveries became. Archaeologists reported that even minimal contact with his relics left them unsettled. One conservator described handling a fragment of his robe only to feel an almost physical weight pressing on his chest, as though the saint's absence was suffocating the air around him. Cameras recorded nothing, yet those present swore shadows shifted, fleeting and deliberate, as if the tomb itself were alive. Volunteers tasked with cataloging documents in the saint's monastery began experiencing disturbing visions. One young historian wrote in his journal that he had seen through hollow sockets, darkness that was not empty, but full of intent. He described flashes of distant wars, forgotten betrayals, and quiet acts of vengeance, as though the saint's missing eyes had witnessed history in ways no one could comprehend. Others reported waking to find their notes altered, words rewritten in handwriting they did not recognize, forming messages that spoke of observation, judgment, and inevitability. Even the local clergy hesitated to speak publicly. Priests whispered of accounts from centuries prior, describing followers who had inexplicably vanished after claiming to hear the saint speaking from beyond the grave. The missing eyes, they suggested, were not simply taken. They were instruments of perception, judgment, perhaps even punishment. The line between life and death blurred. What was observed seemed capable of altering reality. Historians began uncovering patterns among other saints whose tombs displayed similar anomalies. The missing eyes phenomenon was consistent, methodical, and deliberate. Those who tried to study the pattern often reported hallucinations, nightmares, and a sense of being watched. One researcher left his post abruptly, leaving a journal filled with scribbled warnings about eyes that see through centuries and souls that never rest. The entries ended mid-sentence, as though something had silenced him. Forensic studies revealed that the saint's eye sockets bore traces of a mineral unknown to modern science. Analysis suggested it had properties that interfered with neural signals, almost like a conduit for thought or memory. Researchers speculated that the saint's removed eyes had not only been preserved, but had been activated to record or transmit information, a bridge between the living and the dead. The idea was both terrifying and intoxicating. Knowledge never lost, but hidden in the void where sight should have been. Local legends began to resurface, dismissed as superstition until now. Villagers spoke of sudden insight, of knowing events before they occurred, of fleeting visions of hollow eyes in dreams. Some reported seeing the saint's face in mirrors, the sockets deep and dark, observing, judging. A priest recalled an old manuscript describing the extraction of eyes as a final communion, a method by which the saint could witness the world without the limitations of flesh. Yet centuries later, no one knew whether this communion had ended or if it was still ongoing. The deeper the team delved, the more dangerous their work became. Instruments failed without explanation. Objects moved when no one was near. Volunteers left, citing exhaustion, nausea, and an overwhelming sensation that someone or something was monitoring their every thought. Researchers hypothesized that the saint's missing eyes had transcended their physical form, perhaps carrying awareness into the present, observing, storing, and subtly influencing reality. And then came the unnerving realization: if the saint's eyes could affect the living world now, long after death, what else might lie hidden? How many other relics, bodies, and tombs across history had been altered, watched, or controlled by forces beyond human comprehension? Each discovery only deepened the mystery, leaving investigators to confront a chilling truth. The missing eyes were not just a historical curiosity. They were a warning, a challenge, and an enigma that stretched across centuries, daring humanity to look and perhaps to pay the price. The saint's tomb stood silent once more, yet nothing about the silence was comforting. The missing eyes were a void that refused to remain empty. Every investigation, every observation had only confirmed what whispers and legends had long hinted. Death does not always claim dominion over the living. Some presences linger, some knowledge persists, and some eyes, once taken, never stop seeing. Visitors returned, drawn by curiosity or faith, unaware that their own actions could awaken remnants of what had been removed centuries before. A skeptic leaning too close to the skull felt a prickling awareness at the base of his neck, as if unseen vision tracked his every blink. A historian examining the saint's relics late at night awoke to find his notes altered again. Words rewritten, phrases added that spoke of judgments he had not considered, of histories he had ignored. Even modern science seemed powerless. Carbon dating, chemical analysis, and 3D scanning revealed precision, care, and anomalies beyond explanation. Tools and substances unknown to contemporary understanding suggested intelligence, foresight, and intent, operating long after the mortal hand that had first touched them was gone. The missing eyes were no accident. They were an act, a statement, and perhaps a mechanism. Theories emerged, chilling in their plausibility. Perhaps the saint's eyes had been removed to contain perception, to harness awareness that defied death. Perhaps they had been instruments of observation, capable of influencing events through time, or conduits for the living to encounter fragments of what should never have been known. And perhaps, more terrifyingly, this process was not limited to one saint. Across centuries, other bodies had been altered, rituals executed, knowledge hidden in the voids where vision should exist. Those who dared speak of it found themselves questioning reality itself. Was the world truly unobserved when they closed their eyes? Or did some silent witness, hidden, enduring, omnipresent, record every act, every thought, every secret? The missing eyes of a saint were not mere relics. They were a mirror, a warning, and a puzzle. revealing that even in absence, power and observation can persist, shaping what the living believe they control. And the most unsettling realization of all lingered in the minds of those who studied, those who watched, and those who dared to look too long. The cycle could repeat. The eyes removed centuries ago might not have been dormant. They could be waiting, prepared for the next moment, the next observer, the next century. Some part of the saint, silent and unseen, might still witness the world, still judge, still influence, beyond the reach of mortal understanding. The tomb closed, but the void remained. Hollow sockets, precise and deliberate, stared into a darkness that no one could comprehend. And as those who departed glanced back, a question unspoken but undeniable hung in the air. If centuries could not silence him, if eyes once removed could still observe, what chance did the living have to escape the gaze that had begun long before them and would endure long after?